Now, when world leaders gather in 2 months' time in Copenhagen for what's being billed as the most important climate change summit in history, there'll be one Yorkshire politician protesting from the sidelines. UKIP MEP Godfrey Bloom, who's famous for his views on women and pubs, says he's going to picket the UN event in Denmark, which could roll out drastic carbon emission cuts affecting all our lives. And the BBC in Yorkshire and Lincolnshire has learned there's a prominent group of scientists who say those cuts may well be premature. In a moment, we'll be talking live to the Hull East MP and former Deputy Prime Minister John Prescott, who negotiated for Europe at the Kyoto summit, which set internationally binding levels for reducing greenhouse gases. First, though, let's hear Godfrey Bloom's views and then a diametrically opposing opinion from the Green Party.
I don't believe that global warming is caused by man, by CO2 emissions. There's almost no serious scientific evidence to show that. And incidentally, in the last couple of years, there's been a massive swing by independent scientists against that particular hypothesis. Only a few weeks ago, 60 German scientists signed a letter to Angela Merkel to suggest that it was not the case and we needed to rethink. We're spending an absolute fortune on things like wind turbines, which we know don't work. They failed in Germany, they failed in Denmark. They cost an absolute fortune, and they produce electricity at the equivalent of something like $160 per barrel. So it's unbelievably expensive. I would argue we need to stop, break, rewind and rethink this whole energy problem, because at the moment I feel we're getting it very badly wrong.
I brought us here to a scrapyard so that we can see the government's policy of car scrappage in action. Something like 10% to 30% of all the energy it uses in its lifetime is embodied in that car. So why do we send it to the scrapyard? It seems inconceivable that the government is unwilling to rescue the country's own single wind turbine manufacturer, Vestas, while at the same time it's paying people to send cars to the scrapyard before their time. An area like North Yorkshire, with its open spaces, could provide a lot of wind energy, and it's just inconceivable that we should continue to burn coal and oil and produce the gases which are causing climate change.
Well, just before we go to John Prescott, let's hear from another familiar figure on our TV screens. Paul Hudson is Look North's weather forecaster. He's a professional meteorologist and BBC Yorkshire and Lincolnshire's expert on climate change. He's been looking through the latest data for us, and this is what he found.
Well, here in Tropical World, the temperatures are already hot, and some people think that this is what the planet will be like later this century. But did you know there's been no global warming at all since 1998? Moreover, all the climate models had predicted temperatures would continue to rise, when in fact they've levelled out. The climate skeptics say that natural forces control global temperatures. They point out that the sun's been brightening since 1800 and ocean cycles are more important. They say that global warming caused by man is a myth. But the Met Office, which believes global warming is caused by man, says that's rubbish and carbon dioxide drives global temperatures. They are confident that the Earth will soon start warming up again. So the stakes in the science world could not be higher. In 2 months' time, the world's leaders will meet in Copenhagen. Their aim is to make drastic cuts in carbon dioxide because the man-made scientists say that that's what's heating the world, and those cuts will make a profound difference to the way we live our lives. But just last month, one of the world's leading climate scientists said that we could be facing 20 years of global cooling. It seems the debate is far from over.
And you can read more about Paul Hudson's assessment of recent climate change research on his blog. Details on your screen right now. That's bbc.co.uk/blogs/Paul Hudson. Well, listening to all that from his home in Hull is the former Deputy Prime Minister, John Prescott, who's now the Council of Europe's representative on climate change. John Prescott, thanks for joining us live on the Politics Show today. What do you say to the sceptics who are still not convinced of the concept of man-made global warming?
Well, the sceptics you've given me is Godfrey Bloom. He was telling the women to clean behind the fridges, says you can't get these agreements. We got that over the problems of CF gases and the ozone layer. We cleared that as a global problem by changing the gases in the fridges. So you can have global solutions to global man-made problems. That's the first point. Paul's on about the cycles and whether that's true. But you don't take the 20, 30 years. They've gone back thousands of years. And the UN has 1,000 scientists meeting every year in the IPCC committee. And they're reporting from when I was at Kyoto, it's got far worse. There's no doubt about it. I'll take the 1,000 scientists' interpretation and I'll listen to those other voices, but I will not make my judgment on them.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. One of their experts, a Dr. Mujib Latif from Kiel University in Germany, has suggested we could be facing a period of 20 years of global cooling. I mean, surely you have to take all views into account.
Of course you do. Of course you get cycles of cooling. But if you look at the IPCC report, unanimously they report over the long period of time, this is something different. It's shooting off. They have up and down in climate, but in these last few years it's taken up. Why are our glaciers melting? Why is the evidence on the television extreme weather? It's associated with carbon emissions. And if we find an agreement, the science is clear as far as I'm concerned, we've got to do something about the emissions. That's the challenge for us, but also we've got to recognise that some more pollute than the others. If you look at China and America, they're 25% each on emissions. But if you look at the populations of per head, America's 20 tonnes per head, China is 5, Europe is 10, so Copenhagen has got to address itself to justice and equity and poverty in this country, in the world, and put them together. That's what Copenhagen's about. It won't be easy, but we've got to get that agreement because it will affect every one of us in 187 nations. And finally, China and India are coming together, China and America, to talk about how they can balance out this problem of climate change. They're convinced about it, and I'm delighted that an agreement between China shows that Chongqing, a city of 30 million, has lined up with Yorkshire to look at how we can clean up they can clean their rivers up, learn our lessons, and at the same time bring in carbon sequestration, look at the clean coal technology, and let's recognise coal will still apart, and that conference is taking place in Sheffield University. So Yorkshire's doing its bit, whereas in Roos, the wind turbine people are complaining about the picture from their window. For God's sake, grow up and think about your children.
OK, clearly something you feel very passionate about, but let me just pick you up on this subject of wind turbines. You have been very critical of people who oppose wind farms near their homes, but you must have some sympathy with people who worked hard, bought a nice house in the country, and they've had their environment completely changed by wind turbines.
It is about change, but it's about opportunity. We had 33% growth in our economy in the last 10 years under Labour. We still cut the actual gases by 8% and 2 million people at work. But I tell you what, the wind is basically on the East Coast. Just visit there, trying to go out in the sea. But those people don't mind the power stations on the Humber producing the electricity for the quality of their lives. They get in their cars and come over to their work in Hull, presumably producing more carbon. They should worry about their children's children. I saw a notice that said, think of our children, we don't want an incinerator. I understand the argument, but the others then say, think of us and our picture view because we bought a house. For God's sake, many changes are coming, and I asked them, 2/3 of this world, of the 5 billion people, live on less than $2 a day. That isn't only political, it's also environmental, but above all, it's a moral issue. Think of our responsibility. After all, we polluted the world to have your nice little home in East Yorkshire.
OK, many will say we are facing a looming energy crisis in this country. Now, wind power and renewables generally is only going to account for a fraction of our needs. How do you propose we keep the lights on?
Well, there's no doubt about it. It's got to be a combination. You can't rely entirely on the fuel coming from aboard, though we will for the next few years. Nuclear is one. Tidal's another, basically. They're all very expensive, and that's why costs will go up, there's no doubt about it. But wind farms are one part. You really want to depend on your energy, that I hear, from actually building the renewables by the sun in India, if you like, and then importing it right through here to the UK or to Europe. We've got to have a balanced energy with security. So it's coal, it's renewables, it's nuclear, and we have to get a balance. And Ed Miliband has produced the way forward for producing that. Britain is leading the way on a lot of this environmental change. We led the way at Kyoto, and we're going to lead it at Copenhagen under Gordon Brown and Ed Miliband.
John Prescott, live from East Hull this Sunday lunchtime. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.